Yes.
Yes, unless we freeze to death.
We have a little crowd over there or something?
Yeah, I think we did. Just on an agency here. Yeah.
Good.
Let me know when we're all set. Westborough TV? Yeah? Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Just coming back into open session. So we'll start the meeting with the superintendent's update.
And I'm starting off with our kind of big item for tonight is our kind of final redistricting update from Dillinger, but we also, our elementary principals, our K-3 principals are here tonight as well, because if there are questions that come up from you all or you've heard from the community about sort of impact and some of their thinking around the transition, they wanted to be here to pitch in and help out. And, you know, I think this has been a very, very much an iterative process where we've worked through a lot of different options. You'll kind of see where Dillinger is sort of leaning in tonight. And then I'll be looking for some direction from you in terms of timeline, whether it's our next meeting that you want to put that vote on. I do think the only time pressure I'm feeling, and I think our district leadership is feeling, is around the topic of kindergarten enrollment. So delaying a longer time is going to push our enrollment process back, which makes it a little tricky for us. So we're hopeful that the information we get you tonight gives you kind of information you need to make a thoughtful and well-informed decision. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Nick Steltano from Dillinger, who's back.
Good evening, school committee, and good evening to the community. It's a pleasure to be back here almost one final time in terms of presenting the final set of proposed scenarios for your review and decision. I think I can do, yep, great. Just so for those that are unfamiliar or new to this process, my name is Nick Steltano. I'm a member of Dillinger Research and Applied Data. We're a Connecticut-based nonprofit, and we focus on supporting youth-driven organizations around all things data. And so back in October, we partnered with Westborough School District to help change and redesign their attendance zones, or the borders that exist around the 3 elementary schools. And so we're presenting here today, based off of the work that has been done over the past couple months, to the school committee, 3 sets of scenarios that are presented for their consideration, as well as an implementation, as well as a few other recommendations around implementation and new zones as well to be considered as well. Again, we started this process back in October, and the main objectives for this project had been sort of established then, and it's one of the things, or rather the guiding principles that we've been using moving forward. One, and first and foremost, really was around the better utilization of space available at Fales Elementary School. For those that may not be familiar, Fales basically had a new building come into being in around 2021, and the program had basically kicked off in that new building in the school year of 2021. Since then, the overall enrollment has decreased, and it has actually the lowest enrollment, 281 versus 383 across the 3 elementary schools, which makes it about a 60% utilization rate. And so for those that may not be familiar, utilization is the amount of seats a building could potentially house versus how many students are actually in those seats. And so given that Fales was a significant investment for the district and the community at large, part of that plan in terms of the rebuilding of Fales was to reconsider and look at boundaries across the elementary schools to make sure that we're maximizing the new resources. In this process, what we're hoping to do as well is to promote long-term enrollment stability, and that is really in regards to new multifamily housing and sort of the overall demographic shifts that we're seeing across Westborough. And then finally, we want to help create similar student experiences across all K-3 elementary schools. Given the dynamics across Westborough, there are opportunities in which to sort of bring all 3 elementary schools back to the overall average so that each school is sort of a representative view of Westborough at large. So in terms of projects to date, this is just to really indicate in terms of the work that has been put forth, both by my team, as well as the district, and as well as the community members writ large. So in terms of meetings, we had regularly met with you all, the school committee, along with the community, along with the strategic working group on a regular basis. We have met with the school committee 3 times. We've met with the community, both virtual and in person 3 times. And then we've met with a strategic working group, which has representative individuals from across the 3 elementary schools, to include staff, parents, and district representatives. And as you can see, we've met usually once a month, if not twice a month, to work through and try unpack, I think, some of the context that exists within Westborough, as well as the scenario developing as well. We have endeavored to try to get as much input from the public as we can. We've done that through a survey that we had opened up between November 3rd and December 3rd. We had about 52 responses. December 8th through January 3rd, we had another survey that actually got our highest level of response, which was 214, along with some input into the interactive web app, as well as then issuing another survey following the last community meeting, in which we got 130 respondents. Within that, we've had 8 emails addressed to myself and the superintendent. And with that, or with all of that information, along with a lot of the data that we collected both from the district and the town, we were able to do some demographic and enrollment analysis, some projections, and then develop various scenarios. I do want to emphasize, in terms of all of this information has been shared with the school committee as well, to help inform. What I'm about to present in terms of the survey and the feedback is really just a summative snapshot of what we have heard collectively in terms of our conversations in the surveys, and will help just sort of set the stage for going through some of the scenarios. So for today's agenda, we'll quickly go over the survey or some of the comments that we've generally heard from the public. We will review quickly what the scenario development and revision was in terms of both the objectives. I'm going to introduce sort of a set of decision points that will help, I think, frame the trade-offs. From there, we're going to introduce the 3 scenarios that we are presenting to the school committee for consideration. I'll get into these scenarios in a minute, but I do want to emphasize scenario 8 and 1B are new scenarios that had not been previously shared. However, they were iterations off existing scenarios, and so we only subtracted from, we did not add to existing scenarios. And so given the feedback and given the idea that we wanted to present the school committee with a diverse set of scenarios that I think get at the heart of some of these trade-offs, we felt that these 3 were the best representative sample or scenarios across our conversations and analyses. And then finally, we'll talk about implementation. So in terms of the feedback via the surveys, there were a couple broad themes that we were able to sort of raise up and sort of flag. One was around walkability. This really came to the forefront after the January revision scenarios that were released, when we started to introduce the downtown as a potential move from Armstrong to Fales. A lot of individuals sort of expressed the idea that they had chosen the downtown for the express purposes of walking to Armstrong, and that created sort of the environment and the feel that they wanted. And so really that was indicating around specific locations around the downtown area, which can range anywhere from about 0.5 miles to about 1.2 miles in terms of distance from Armstrong. In terms of opposition to disruption, in any case, when you're doing a realignment or a redistricting, there is going to be disruption. And so given the various scenarios that we had sort of put out for feedback, there were a couple that really sort of indicated some disruption that was what they perceived as being higher than others. Scenario 5 incorporated the idea of moving Arrive from Armstrong to Fales, and this sort of raised some concern that that is such a significant population and a significant diverse population that moving that entire complex from Armstrong could really change the dynamic and significantly impact the cultural feel of Armstrong. Scenario 6, again, back to this downtown area. A lot of people feel, I think, very close and within a neighborhood that exists in the downtown area. And so the idea that they wouldn't be able to walk to Fales like they were or are in terms of Armstrong was a concern. And then the McTaggart Estates, which is towards the west side, was just flagged a couple times in regards to the overall desire to want to stay within Armstrong. I do want to kind of put this into context. Again, we received over 300 surveys. In terms of these specific flags, we're talking probably about 15 or so respondents indicated these specific sorts of pieces of feedback. So by no means is it representative of the entire feedback, but they were, I think, definitely some concerns that were brought up. Openness to using fails for new growth. I think a couple things. One is there was that indication both in the survey and some of the conversations we had in terms of the community engagement around, hey, if we have these new multifamily housing units coming online, let's please try to think about how we can move those into fails. I do have a recommendation. I'm going to talk to that in a couple slides, but that was brought to their attention. The Arrive Homestead, I think there was at least some positive sort of piece to the idea that fails is an exciting and new building, and that it's not all bad if different aspects of the community are redirected to fails so that they can sort of benefit from the new facility and the new resources as well. And then again, that whole idea that, hey, we've invested in fails, so there's sort of an excitement around the idea of let's try to maximize those new resources. And then finally, when it came to the implementation, which again, I tried to stress the implementation versus the plan, two separate things. There is a desire that many parents would like to see their child stay out their entire time at their existing school, both to stay within their cohort of friends, to also, again, support the idea of siblings going through the same schools. And then beyond that, there has been a couple respondents that have sort of indicated that, the timeline is a bit compressed and we feel a bit rushed in terms of how they have perceived the overall process. So in terms of the overall general feedback, again, from the community conversations that we've had in the surveys, again, you all have been provided with the actual survey results. Any questions about anything you've heard or maybe some emails you've received?
I think the only question that I have about any feedback is from the meeting last Monday, because I think that was after the second survey, and it was the first time the community would see the new scenarios, right?
No, the new, scenario 8 was released at that time, not scenario 1.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking that wouldn't have had the opportunity to come through on any of those surveys. Can you give us
absolutely.
a summary?
Well, so the good news is the scenario was open through the 15th. So the Friday after the Monday that we had that community event, we had about 5 parents show up in person and about 40 people show up virtually. And the conversations were pretty much in line with everything I said. There was this desire around the walkability piece, and that they would prefer other areas to be moved and not the downtown, as well as just, again, the idea that we'd love to think about some concept of grandfathering.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Actually, maybe it's more to Allison as well. These issues of grandfathering, siblings, can we, for the next meeting, can we see how the different scenarios will impact, like how many siblings are we talking about? How, in those particular groups that we moved, I will just give me some more information about how many kids will be impacted in different scenarios.
We have that a little bit further on in the presentation tonight.
Okay.
There is a little bit more detail about grandfathering and impact, both in terms of the number of students we're talking about and the financial impact. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So in terms of the scenario objectives, just to kind of, again, realign everybody, balancing the schools and really thinking about how we can maximize fails utilization was that sort of key focus. Planning for tomorrow in terms of thinking about how the enrollment trends have shaped where we are currently, and then ultimately some of the new developments coming forward. Thinking about parity in education. And this was really just thinking about, in the event that we can move students from Hastings and Armstrong, that presents a unique opportunity to open up space and I think educational opportunities within those two schools. At this moment in time, there does feel a little bit of a constrained environment within Hastings and Armstrong, given the number of students that each are housing, along with just their overall setup and design as well in those buildings. And then finally, in terms of the one community, again, we're trying to emphasize the idea that how can we make sure that the populations across these 3 elementary schools are very representative of Westborough at large. So first, in terms of the new developments, I've shared this slide the last time I was in front of you all, but it bared sort of doing it again just for conversation and for recommendation's sake. So in terms of the 4 developments that we have worked with the town around that have been essentially approved, that are in the pipeline, that will be operationalized, we endeavored to work with the town to provide a range of estimates in regards to how many students we think will be sort of living there on a annual basis. And what you're seeing here in terms of the yields is really just the K-3 yield. And I do want to emphasize that I think these are quite optimistic in terms of the amount of students that would show up, but we did try to be somewhat sort of thoughtful in regards to how could we look at existing facilities and use that as a proxy to estimate how many students we think potentially could be there. And so a couple things that sort of tie out, given the location of where these multifamily housing units are, I don't think it's realistic to assume that all of them could go to fails, even if we wanted them to. And even if we did, even at the highest range estimates, which I think are very, again, optimistic, it still would not get us to achieve what we're trying to get at in terms of fails utilization. So in terms of that, that idea, as a couple of the parents had sort of suggested, is, the scenario in which let's just take all the new facilities and put them to fails, we felt was not either optimizing fails to its extent and really doing it in a meaningful, timely way that was sort of addressing the current needs of the district. So that is not one of the scenarios that we proposed. We did want to emphasize, though, and I highlighted this in red, is that the first recommendation that we would highly encourage you to consider is do not preemptively zone these units. I think as they start to be built and as they start to be filled with parents and whatnot, in a couple of years, you can then reassess ultimately when all the up-to-date information is there, where logically some of these units could be relocated, or rather, I'm sorry, rezoned.
Can I just ask you a question about, in terms of your experience with this? I mean, I would find that a little bit, I'm not sure how I feel about that, because I think there's a lot of people who buy properties in certain areas based on the district into which they're zoned for schools. So how, that leaves us with some real unpredictability for the people moving into those units, and they buy them well in advance of them being built oftentimes. But they do buy them a lot of times based on where their child might be zoned for a school. It's just something to think about. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
No, I think it's a great point. I would say the truth is somewhere in between now and when the first tenant moves in, right? There is a timeline that I think we could probably better optimize given what we know to be true in the future. That being said, as you sort of pointed out, it's also, I would say, on the flip side, hard to sort of project this back to fails and assume that's going to solve the problem when we don't even have anybody who has chosen to move in yet. So from that perspective, it's kind of I think it's a lose-lose situation, of which this newer suggestion in terms of this recommendation would at least provide the city and the district with a little bit of a breathing room. To your point, you probably have to make a decision sooner than you'd want, but I think it would be closer to that end state than now, I should say.
Wouldn't they right now just be like the Milk and Turnpike in Armstrong and Lyman and Connector in Hastings? Like, if...
Correct.
Yep.
Well, yeah, so
Isn't
that's
that
kind
how
of
it
the
would
point
just work?
I'm trying to make, but when you say that the recommendation is to not preemptively zone, you're suggesting that we would make no decision about where those units would be going right now.
I think
Not
he's
just
saying they
about
wouldn't go to
fails, right?
fails.
Correct. Yes.
Which is correct. Sorry, she said something.
No. So yeah. So if you were considering they're not being built yet, to preemptively say they are not currently zoned to the 2 schools that they would intuitively be zoned to, yes, you would be leaving it open to a later date at which I'm sure the town and the development itself is going to say, hey, I need an emphasis, or I need a point for you to decide, in the future. That I'm suggesting, why do it now when you could at least buy yourself probably another year at least to understand how the overall enrollment trends are changing.
Sure.
I've kind of been through this in another district, and given the number of them and additional developments that may be coming online, it may be something that is important to kind of keep as a strategy for thinking about the distribution of kids throughout the district. We have at least one satellite kind of entity already, and the fact that we have it means that it's a kind of it's a possible way of doing business here. Once that's been established, it does open it up, and it opens up the possibility of really being able to balance enrollment more effectively than if you go with straight geographical lines. So I think that's the argument for considering it. It's not, but it's a consideration for you all.
Well, I'll even add one more to that too. Given the analysis that we've seen across Westborough, the existing geographical region of Fales is not growing. So either you set yourself up to be able to have flexibility in regards to how you zone in the future, or we'll be back here again in 5 to 8 years because of the demographic shifts.
I guess I would add that 25 years ago, the zones were pretty much anticipated that build out was going to happen. Since then, we've changed the zoning about 5 times, including the fact that these developments you're looking at are relatively new based on new zoning changes. So in my mind, it's premature to say that the west end of town or the south end of town is going to stay zoned exactly the way it is.
And that's a fair point. I'm only going off the data I have.
Yeah.
But yeah, no,
I understand. But I mean, the point being is that all the things that are in your study provide the tools to consider many different ways to do
correct.
this. And, I mean, as Yakub brought up earlier, the sensitivity to those with one last year in the current layout really should be considered to be grandfathered, in my opinion. Because I don't think from even a busing point of view, that's going to make a big difference for a few kids that might be, headed to future fails under any scenario that we pick. Somehow or another, we could make it through one more year under the current scheme if we considered those who didn't want to go. However, I would also add simply that Fales has the opportunity for a much different kind of education based on what was built in that building versus older buildings that are restricted based on layout, floor plan, and so on. So parents should consider both and look at both before they make up their mind what they really want to do.
That is a fair point. And we'll talk more about the implementation at the end. Okay, excellent. All right, so decision points. I did want to emphasize when you're all considering the different scenarios, not a rubric per se, but given the conversations that we've had and given the objectives, there were a set of decision points, or as I like to say, trade-offs, that you all have to consider as we're thinking about each scenario. In a perfect world, all of these would be maximized to their fullest extent, and that would make the scenario choice easy. Usually, and as is the case with most redistrictings, it is near impossible to optimize across all of these decision points. And so ultimately, that leaves you with a no perfect solution, and one that you have to consider, is that trade-off worse or better than the other trade-off? And then that even incorporates with who are we talking about when it comes to the trade-off, because ultimately you have a lot of different stakeholders across the district. So in terms of just quickly reviewing these, right, we wanted to optimize Fales utilization. Given the conversation and the modeling that we had with the principal, that end state was trying to get to 80 to 85%. We think that is kind of the sweet spot in terms of not overloading the classes in the existing space. We did want to take the opportunity to relieve Hastings and Armstrong. Again, given the opportunity to move kids so that we are creating a little bit more free up space in terms of the other two schools, again, that is an opportunity that we felt was an important piece given the current context. We wanted to ensure that there was a balanced demographic and geography by integrating diverse neighborhoods, right? And so part of this is not just, we'll just take a handful of kids here and a handful of kids here. It's where are those kids coming from? And how does that sort of, again, create the demographic look of each school? We wanted to account for future growth, recognizing, again, currently, as was sort of stated, the existing patterns that we're seeing in regards to development are taking place in 2 out of the 3 zones, but not all 3 together. We wanted to respect historical stability. This one was, I think, that came up during conversations where, given what we know to be true about the previous redistricting, the idea that we would then shift back what had been shifted before was less appealing. It's not something we didn't consider, and it's not something that we kind of didn't test around. But generally speaking, what we heard when we tried to do that was, we already moved once, please don't move me again. And then finally, financial sustainability, right? Some of these choices are actually going to cost the district more money, given some busing considerations. And so that is also, a consideration that has to be played. So within each of these scenarios, we will review each of these to kind of get you a sense on how we're what we're giving up or what we're trading off. So in terms of the proposed scenarios, we are proposing scenario 8, 1B, and 5. I gave you a description of each. I'm not going to bore you by reading this. We will go in depth across each of these scenarios. I think what's important here, which I kind of wanted to emphasize, was, again, all 3 of these scenarios are sort of run the gambit of what is possible. Scenario 8, which I did flag, is the one that we recommend, that we feel maximizes across all different decision points. Really does get fails up to an 83% utilization, while sort of again trying to maximize what we're trying to do with the other 2 elementary schools as well. Scenario B, as you will see, tries to minimize the number of youth that we're moving, but then really it does not get fails to any meaningful closeness to 80%, and actually gets you at 74%. So scenario 1B is the how do we sort of minimize movement, try to get as much benefit as we can, but ultimately not achieving that max objective that we had wanted, which was fails, getting them to an adequate utilization. And then scenario 5, given some of the conversations that we've heard from the community, there was the idea of, okay, what if we move Arrive? And so scenario 5 is really the idea of, if you were to move Arrive, what would that mean? What would be the dominoes that have to fall to make the process work? And so, as we'll get into, by moving Arrive, that is a significant adjustment across the district that would have implications both at fails, given its high utilization, almost too high, and some of the changes that we would see at Armstrong. So you can basically interpret this slide as scenario 8 is our recommended, scenario 1B would be the second priority, and then scenario 5 would be our third recommended scenario. So going into it in more detail, scenario 8 is very much like scenario 6, except for the fact that there was a portion of Hastings that we sort of took off the table in regards to the movement. So in terms of what would be true, you can interpret the right-hand map as anything that is colored in that orange are different aspects of Armstrong and Hastings that would be rezoned to fails. So we would have Park and Homestead, which are your 2 outlying multifamily housing units, being relocated to fails. Westborough Village, which is an existing satellite location, which would also be going to fails. And then there would be the 2 additional regions. These are the downtown regions that sort of express their dissatisfaction with the idea that they like to walk to Armstrong, and that is a consideration that they would like to be considered. So in that case, you have Bay State Commons area, which is your Hastings, the northeast portion of downtown, and then the neighborhoods around the high school, which is your sort of central location from Armstrong. I'm going to skip over the considerations because we'll go through the decision points. Here, what we tried to do was provide you with, here are the decision points, and we'll go through them one by one. And then on the right-hand side, we had each of the principles sort of model out, if this was the scenario, what are we getting at all 3 schools? And I think that's sort of an important context to understand and inform how we're sort of talking about the decision points. So 1, like we had talked about before, fails utilization would be at 83%. That means that they would have 19 sections or classrooms, up from the current 15 that they have, and the average class size would be about 20. Again, given the primary objective of what this realignment was for, that is one of the main reasons why we think scenario 8 really hits the mark in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. It does relieve Hastings and Armstrong's. It reduces overcrowding and opens up space. So on the right-hand side, Hastings would be about 65% utilization. Armstrong would be about 68% utilization. Again, provides space in case that there is additional students that move in, as well as opening up a couple different classrooms for different opportunities within the schools themselves.
Could you?
Yes, sir.
Could you explain why are those ranges like 1 to 4 classrooms?
So part of the decision making, and I might defer to the principals, but generally speaking, in terms of the modeling, right, one of the things that we did was roll over the grade levels, so you would have a good sense of what the overall population is. And you're also sort of guesstimating what you think the incoming kindergarten enrollment is going to be. So first and foremost, we're working with kind of like tentative numbers. On top of that, there is decisions that come along with how big you want the classrooms to be, right? So in terms of thinking about the average students in a classroom could range anywhere from 18 to 22. Given cohort sizes and given what we're seeing in terms of space and trying to keep cohorts together in regards to, you know, all the kindergarten classrooms next, you could like have a slight adjustment here or there based on if you want to aim for that 18 or 20 classrooms. I'm pretty confident. I'm going to look behind me. None of the principals really were ideally looking for 22 students per classroom, but was that a fair representation of how we?
Fair representation. We didn't run any scenarios that brought us to 3. If we knew that we had said 22 would be maximum. Obviously, if we had a classroom that or enough sections that created a class of 12, that would be far too few. So that's why you have a range.
Okay, thank you.
What I was looking for, especially I think in Hastings, was you know, what was the number of kids that needed to be moved that opened up at least one classroom, or ideally felt like we could open up one classroom, because ultimately, in terms of the space constraints that we were dealing with, I think that's, again, one of those key aspects that I was like, aha, that's really great. That's what we're sort of looking for. This sort of move in terms of the downtown and the two multifamily housing really does achieve a more balanced demographic profile across all the 3 schools. All 3 schools generally move towards the average. Yes, ma'am?
Question, the financial stability piece that you mentioned, does that include potential grandfathering?
No. So I will emphasize to the nth degree, I need to focus on the plan. The implementation is a separate financial choice that needs to come down to it. But yeah, sorry, I was going to get to that. We'll skip to it though. Financial sustainability. Given that we'd have to move the downtown and working with the district and the transportation team, it was determined that you would need another bus because given the fact that the schools have the same start time and given how the current bus routing system works, there would not be unlike the multifamily housing units where it's usually one bus per multifamily housing unit. In this case, there are other geographical regions that are picking up these students. Is that a safe statement?
That's correct. Essentially, that downtown area, it's multiple stops on a bus, including south of 30 and sometimes north of 30. So we'd have to split bus routes and add a bus to the system. And I think that's that's the one kind of downside of this scenario. Well, one of the downsides of this scenario, or the trade-offs, is that we would need to plan for another bus route.
In terms of accounting for future growth, which we'll get to in a second, it does seemingly maximize where fails needs to be, and then obviously opens up space in Hastings and Armstrong to have a lot of that flexibility. And then in terms of, again, that respecting the historical stability, we would not be moving any, geographical regions that had been previously redistricted before. This is a slide that I have for each of the scenarios, and what it is it's sort of a look back. And so I really want to emphasize this is not actual enrollments. Well, this is how many kids actually were enrolled in Westborough in K3 at the time. However, it would be reassigning them to each school based on scenario 8's geographical regions. And so a couple things I provided you with how the overall enrollment would have changed over those current years, as well as the utilization on the bottom, as well as some just simple trend lines on the right-hand side so you can visualize, how overall enrollment has been changing or would have changed across the 3 schools, as well as the overall K3 enrollment. And so in this case, you can see that, again, overall trend, enrollment has been slowly ticking its way down. Utilization would generally be also declining. And you'll notice fails, we didn't start the utilization until 21-22 because that's when the new building came online. So generally speaking, you can see in terms of 25-26, we would hypothetically be at 68%, 83%, and 65%, providing, again, that flexibility for ideally an increase in enrollment in the future, but ultimately trying to balance out the utilization across the 3 schools to some extent, really specifically between Armstrong and Hastings, whereas we're maximizing fails. This is also provided for each scenario, and these are the scenario statistics. Again, I will not read them out, but anybody can kind of leverage them to sort of understand that, again, there's no huge shifts, but really an approach to the average when comparing to the baseline. All right, scenario 1B. This was, again, the newest scenario that we decided to incorporate, given a lot of the feedback that we heard. And so here, this is very emblematic of scenario 8. However, all of the downtown is not included in the move. And so you literally just have Park on the Armstrong side and Homestead in the Hastings side still be relocated to Fales. And so in that case, you would have no additional regions. And I'm just going to skip to the next slide. And this is how it plays out, right? Fales, again, would be, in our estimate, very underutilized still at 74%. That would be 19 sections up from 15 sections, but a smaller class size. It would positively relieve Hastings and Armstrong. So again, thinking in the context of moving Homestead, which is a good solid group of about 30 students, we would basically see, again, that 1, maybe 2 classrooms opening up. They would be at a utilization of 67%, whereas Armstrong would be at 74%, again, still being able to open up 1 to 2 classrooms. We would slightly decrease demographic variability, again, moving everybody to the average, not as much as scenario 8. And we would, again, account for future growth, but not as much, in our opinion, as scenario 8. We would respect historical stability. We would not be moving any previous boundaries. And then again, in this case, there would be no additional costs. The one bus that helps move the Park, and then a separate one bus that would be moving Homestead, could then just be reallocated to provide that busing to Fales instead of Hastings and Armstrong, respectively. In terms of the overall enrollment, again, and the overall utilization, this is probably, you could look at is how do we make all of the utilizations as equal as possible with minimizing the amount of student movement. Again, scenarios for your review. And then finally, scenario 5 looks very much like scenario 1B. However, instead of moving Park, we're actually moving Arrive. Arrive is significantly more in regards to the number of students that would move. And so Park, I believe, was about 35. Arrive is 101. So a significant increase in terms of the number of students. And this sort of plays out across a couple different ways now. It moves Fales utilization up to 87%. And so now, if you look in the bottom right-hand corner, you're talking 20 to 23 sections. You would have class sizes, ideally between 18 and 21, probably more closer to the 21 based on how many sections you choose. And this would impact educational programming. And by that, I mean your standard art and specials classes would probably have to move out of their room to make space for educational classrooms. Can be done, and it is typically how schools evolve over time, but ideally not what I think we're looking for in terms of the educational experience at the new building. In terms of relieving Hastings and Armstrong, Hastings, again, you would open up that one classroom. The Armstrong, you would open up a significant number in regards to how many students you would move. 4 to 5 classrooms. Again, the biggest issue with this is in regards to how each school would look in relation to the overall average. By moving Arrive from Armstrong to Fales, you would actually just be swapping how Fales currently is to being Armstrong in regards to being somewhat isolated in regards to diversity, and then you would be moving a rich, diverse population over to Fales. And so we feel that is problematic in regards to how that overall balance would play out. We would, again, not be moving any historical geographical regions that had been switched before. And again, in this case, even though there are more buses transporting Arrive students, you still would not have any additional costs. And again, just for your awareness here, and I apologize, there was a typo on the previous slide. Armstrong would actually go down to 60% utilization if you were to move Arrive, which it's not, 65% is better than 60%, but 60% now is, again, you're just swapping the problems that you were having with Fales being extremely underutilized and being isolated to now Armstrong being in that same situation. And then scenario statistics as well. So before we get into the implementation, any questions about the 3 scenarios?
I have a lot of comments, but maybe at the end of your presentation.
Do you feel like we happy to talk now, or like I said, I would very much like to keep implementation separate from the scenario conversation, because as painful as it is, they are 2 separate decision points.
I guess just one question. This is maybe more for Anita, and I know that we can look this up as well. But the 88,000, do we have any sense of what percentage of the total transportation budget that is?
Do a quick calculation.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
I'll give you my comments. Then.
Please go.
Okay, on the scenario 1B, what I like about scenario 1B is that if you look at the slide where you showed how the population would change over the last 10 years, if it was allocated this way, that's your slide 20.
Yep. I
Right.
believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks pretty even. If I look at the number of students in each building, I don't see big outliers. As you go to scenario 8, the same comparison on slide 16. You
Oh.
have years like 18, 19, Fales would have 469 students as opposed to 325 in Hastings. So there's I understand this is in the past. We're looking at a different distribution, but that's just something to keep in mind. I don't like that there is additional cost in scenario 8. I think that's a big negative that we're gonna have to defend to the community, that we have to inflate our budget and explain what's the benefit that we gain, including financial benefit of doing the redistricting to begin with. And also in scenario 8, you are moving the walkable neighborhood out of and putting them on the bus, and like you pointed out, that was one of the comments from the parents. But I am scenario 5. I don't like about what I don't like about scenario 5 is that it doesn't open too much space in Hastings. There's only one classroom that would open up. I am curious though about the principals, if they have settled on the recommendation.
Why don't we get all of our comments and then we can have them coming.
I see. Yeah,
You know what I mean? If there's.
we can do it later. That's okay.
Why don't
And
we-
so only one more comment. I actually strongly support the recommendation of not preemptively zoning. I think I don't want to put ourselves in a corner with these decisions before we know the actual population after people move in. And I understand it creates some kind of discomfort to the families that might be moving in, but I'd rather give us more options in the future than settling it down. So I would follow your recommendation.
I have a few comments. I agree with you, actually. I was just posing an argument for why, the other side of it. I have preemptive zoning. I think we should wait. I just don't want to, we need to figure out when.
Well, yeah,
So we
when's
can't wait
too
too long. It's definitely, there's enough time at this point. So I'm struggling. I think the biggest piece of what I'm struggling with is in your recommended scenario, we've got the downtown and putting them on a bus. And I'm I think that was one of our major goals, was the walkability piece was part of the assessment. And I'm concerned about that. I know that some parents have already voiced their opinion about that. Frankly, like my opinion hasn't changed in the sense that I still personally would have supported scenario 5, because I also 1B would not support 1B because it's not enough utilization. Like, we went through this process for a reason, and I just don't think that it's enough. And the whole issue with Fales is what you stated earlier, which is that there is no new construction happening there where you'd have the ability to organically fill that school. And I like the idea. Yes, we can try to look at different ways of moving people around as the new construction comes up. On the other hand, I do like predictability and when there's an organic way of kind of zoning kids because of proximity, or general proximity. So the way I see it is that the construction, and this is how I've seen it from the beginning, is that a lot of where the construction is happening, these units are coming up in areas that would naturally either be zoned to Armstrong or Hastings. So in my mind, an underutilization in those schools, you know, it'll get backfilled. I'm not personally so worried about it, but I understand that we cannot say for 100% that it's going to look like this or that. You know, the general trends in our community have been a certain way, and I would think that it's safe to assume it's going to continue in that direction. Although, again, that's sort of just my opinion. And I too want to hear from the principals. I think my biggest question is, I think a lot of us, and I would say even you, when you came in here first, one of your strongest scenarios was this scenario, and I think that you had strongly recommended it at that time, and then we did all of the feedback and all that, and I think we've landed elsewhere at this point. But I'm trying to understand this whole conversation about the impact on Armstrong, because I think that that is playing a huge part in the decision to not move Arrive. And I'm fine with that if that's something that, you know, but I'd like to hear more about it and try and understand what the impact is going to be exactly, in terms of, is it for teachers that we're worried about teachers moving? Are we worried about the students moving? What is it that we're, you know, trying to, so I would love to hear from you, Aiden, when you're ready to do that after we get through all of our comments. But those are my comments at this point. I'm still very undecided, but my gut was always a scenario 5. So we'll just see where it goes. Go ahead. Do you have any?
Well, one question I have, I don't know who can answer this. How many classrooms or sections was Fails designed to hold? Do we know?
We had a spare classroom included in the original design so that we could handle the population that existed at the time, plus one spare classroom. I think that's right.
And I'm sorry, Mary, you said 20?
Yeah, 20 plus one spare classroom.
Okay.
And that's also incorporating the special education program, district-wide program.
When we were designing Fails, we did not have a therapeutic program piece, so that utilizes 3 classroom spaces within Fails currently. So that's not accounted for. So that shifts some of my other special education pieces. So in scenario 5, that impacts the bumping of where everybody goes. So we would actually want to use the bonus classroom, 21st classroom, for special education services. That's part of it.
Because that's really helpful. Thank you. I mean, I think from the beginning, we've been saying 65 at Armstrong isn't the same as 65 at Fails, and 65 at Hastings isn't the same as 65 at Fails. So when I'm looking at Armstrong and Hastings, their utilization, if it's a little bit lower because of the trends that we see,
Yep.
too, the slides that you provided with the historical enrollment, even in the new scenario, Fails is going down for all of them, and Armstrong is stable. So we can assume that Fails will keep going down. Would you?
Yeah, I think you had also mentioned sort of the appeal of what we were seeing here. So interestingly, I'll just sort of focus on Fails for a second. Yeah, generally speaking, the predominant amount, if you like, I'm looking at 17-18, right, which is 451 kids, and you bring it down to 390, quote unquote, as it would be today. The majority of that outflow of students would be students who had originally lived in the geographical region of Fails and its current satellite boundary, right? So you are seeing a general outflow from that specific region in and of itself.
Yeah, and you provided some really interesting maps of downtown, of the whole district, but and the enrollment trends over the years. And I think the downtown area, Armstrong and Hastings, is among the only that are increasing, right? So I mean,
Or at least stable, yeah.
yeah. So I keep going back to, we can expect those schools to continue growing, and Fails to continue decreasing, because I don't think those trends are going to change in the areas around Fails. This issue my gut was scenario 5 too, but I'm very interested to hear about, really what the impact of moving Arrive out of Armstrong is. And I am concerned about what looks like at 87% at Fails, like art not having an art room, not having specials. I mean, that's totally goes against why we built Fails, to have a maximize the educational experience. Would that be like a 1-year thing? Would everything even out after, I mean, I don't know who can answer this, but
Yeah, I don't, I mean, some of the answer to that question depends on long-term enrollment. I do think one of the things that's true that Marianne pointed out is there's district-wide programming at Fails that was not anticipated when the building was built. That is occupying space that other special education programming might be in, and that programming is then in a classroom space. So they are really using the space very well for both school-based and district-wide programming. I think scenario 5 puts pressure on that structure so that, Marianne's job would be a job that every principal has to face at some point when enrollment ticks up, which is to sort of figure out who am I going to move and where. Typically looking at specials is one place to move. There might be other ways to do it. I think she has just made us aware that those numbers, the particular configuration of those numbers, would necessitate something that's going to be a change and that could have a programmatic impact. Meaning, if we have special education programming that is working well in a space, and it's doing that for a reason, or if we have other programming like art that's working well in a space and we move it, there's going to be a loss. So there's a trade-off there. And I think it's very important to recognize that. I do feel like the principals and, we've, going through this process, it's nice to work with people who are so intimately seeped into the fabric of the schools. They've done extraordinary work kind of modeling out each of these scenarios in real detail and looking at impact and being very thoughtful about what it would mean. So I want to listen carefully to what they have
Yeah.
to say.
And just thank you, Allison. And the last thing I would say is I feel really strongly that changing or redistricting a student that can walk to their school, whether or not they choose to walk to the school, seems like not a good idea. And we're hearing that from the community loud and clear. And I think people buy homes downtown because they value walkability. And even if they don't walk to the school, they may walk on the weekend to the school for play, walk to friends' houses. People buy houses downtown who value walkability. So taking that away from them, I am really struggling with that. So that's another thing that I'm thinking about.
I guess a couple of obvious things that I see when I just look at the maps. The Fails area, generally the south end, but not the right end of that district, is our old neighborhoods. The families there have had their children. That's the reason why the district number of children is dropping, because it's an old community now. What we're finding in other places in the town that, older people are moving out, they're selling their houses to new families, and the new families are producing more kids in the district. So, the fact that all these numbers that we're looking at are not dynamic, even in the Fails area, you just got to think about the fact that, how old is the neighborhood? Why are their kids dropping? They're dropping because there's older people. Those kids have, graduated from the school system, gone off to college, and maybe, there'd be a whole new cycle. So I know that's not counted in what you're doing. At least I don't think it is. The other side of the coin is if you look at the boundary between what would be considered the Hastings boundary in the same area as Fails, all you got to move is a couple of streets one way or the other and move them out of Hastings and into Fails. And I'm sure those neighborhoods wouldn't complain too much because, in fact, that lower tier, particularly the rectangular piece chopped out, that could change. And in fact, you'd have a neighborhood that could walk to Fails, certainly don't walk to Hastings. So, all these things are subject to what happens between now and 5 years from now. And 5 years from now, this town, may increase its population by 5,000. It may drop by 5,000. And all of that, it plays into where the boundaries are going to be and how it works. But 2 out of the 3 scenarios that we have will deal with the distribution of the demographics in such a way that generally we're in pretty good shape. So some of these minor changes can actually deliver kids to a different school fairly easily. And the other side of the coin is, look at the central part of the Fales area. I guess we've got Hockomock in there. No, not Hockomock, the town's reservoir. But there is still a fair amount of open space in the Cream District and the Blue District that still could be built on, particularly, on the north end of town towards Chauncey. So, none of this is actually fixed in stone. The idea that we discussed of not already locking out certain areas, I think gives us the freedom to adjust the population in any school pretty much by a few minor changes to the boundary. So, certainly I look at 8 and at 1B over 5 for that reason, that the population is lower, the ability to deal with the demographics is higher, and the idea that we would still allow certain areas to walk to school. But again, also I have to say I was really impressed with the emails that you received, particularly with the sensitivity of the writers in understanding the process being beneficial overall to everybody, but having their own points of view in terms of how they perceive what we're doing here. And I really appreciate what I read on the basis of that sensitivity. And so the town is paying attention to this process to the point where we will ultimately end up in the best way that we can under the current issues associated with redistricting. So I guess with that, I look forward to how we get there.
So I just want to check with Tim. Did you already make your comments?
No, I just said.
Okay, so if we could have the principals come. Did you say you had?
I did have a couple quick things.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
I
sure,
didn't, I'm sorry.
No problem. And I wasn't sure, Anita, if you were able to figure out what the percentage of that might be roughly.
So it's about 2.12%.
2.12 of the transportation budget, correct?
Correct.
Gotcha. And am I correct in assuming, I know that it sounds like we're kind of trending towards the way of we're not planning to preemptively zone, but like assuming that in the future, if that is what we decided, even if we picked one of the scenarios that would increase the transportation budget, zoning those into fails likely would necessitate another bus. Is that correct?
I think that's a safe statement.
Yeah, sure.
It sort of depends on the student population. I mean, if the student population hits a large enough number, we're going to need a bus anyway.
Okay.
So I think that's the reality of it.
So that makes sense. And then just a couple quick questions. I know as you're going through, one thing that you obviously touched on is respect to historical, the changes that were made previously. I want to confirm, when was the last time that we rezoned K through 3?
That would have been about 10 years ago, right around when. Yes, thank you. That's what I was like. I know there was something up there. The Westborough Village, when it was decided that would be satellite boundary to fails. That was, I think, 2014, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and I know that you touched on this briefly, but could you just speak a little bit more about maybe some feedback that you received? Because I guess as I think about it, with 10 years, that likely a lot of parents that did it, were impacted by that in K through 3 might no longer have students of that age. And so I'm curious, it sounds like you did hear directly, though, that there were people that might be affected.
Yeah, I'll give 3 anecdotes. So interestingly, to your point about Hastings sort of entry into fail, so to speak, that boundary. I have not heard, I don't think I've heard any feedback around how they're closer to fails, so please switch us back to fails. Like the good news or the bad news in your all's case is everybody loves their schools, even if they seemingly are traveling far. And so at no point have I heard somebody say, well, I'm closer to this school, so please redistrict us. I did hear one parent who their child is going to be kindergarten this coming year, and she lives south of 30 in Armstrong. So there was the south and north kind of thing we were playing around with. She wanted to switch because her argument is there are actually neighborhoods that have been split because of the previous redistricting, and so get us back into that neighborhood so we can go to Fales. So that was there. But on the flip side, I think one of the emails really detailed out, no, there's a neighborhood that is entrenched in Armstrong, and so don't redistrict us again. And we have our community, our home is in Armstrong as well. So it was really fascinating. And I apologize for using that term, but like in terms of just the various nature of what we heard in comparison to then the rest of the district.
Sure. Yeah. And I guess that's part of why I bring this up, because I completely understand that, these are very complex as you're going through these models and there's a lot that you're looking at. I guess I'm just curious, and this was kind of to Steve's point, it sounded like somewhat as well, just as we're talking about scenario 8 and potentially, being a good possibility, but that there's some pain in removing the walkability aspect. Yep. My eye does go to that kind of rectangle that Steve, I think was describing to the east of Fales, and like those neighborhoods there. And so I guess, understanding it's very complex, my mind went to, oh, maybe those were historically zoned and that's why, just because that seems like if those aren't walkable, like I agree that nobody wants to move necessarily, even if they're physically closer, but if it's a question about walkability versus not walkability, that might, make a difference. So.
Yeah, that's the toughest zone, right? Like, so I think at the end of the day, a couple considerations that I'm sort of just bouncing around in my mind when I think about this is, there is, to your point in regards to the historical nature of the Fales geographical boundary, yes, I think people are getting older, and so you would expect some level of a refresh, if you will, of older generations moving out, younger generations moving in. We have yet to see that, just given the current trend of what we're seeing. The overall type of housing and the expense of that housing, I think, actually precludes that, right? We're talking $1 million houses. So this is not starter homes. You're not going to see, I think, a huge movement, I should say, of new families coming in for that very reason. Again, could change in terms of overall housing prices, housing markets, all that other stuff. But there truly is that dynamic of the South versus the North in regards to the overall, we'll call it medium housing price in terms of what you're sort of seeing. And so when it comes to the downtown area, it's kind of, in our mind, again, I know it costs $88,000, but busing is already being provided for them. It would be one thing if the majority of them were within like a half a mile, and like I felt really good that like, yeah, you could see it. Like there were tons of survey responses that we said like, I can literally see that school, do not move me. And that I'm sort of sympathetic to. In this case, you are talking about people who are 0.8 to 1.2 miles. The majority of them are pretty much at that mile marker. They can get picked up by the bus. And so, yes, though not ideal, I feel personally, given the analysis, it's a suitable trade-off given what we're trying to accomplish with the district as a whole. And that really is kind of the trick of the whole affair, is like, how do you balance the needs of the few with the many and vice versa?
I was hoping if maybe we could just take this time for the principals to come up and sort of add your comments.
Oh. I want to give them a quick shout out. They a lot of the focus that they've made here is on implementation, and so I did not say be prepared to give your opinion on anything tonight. I think so they're a little bit on the spot right now, but they're awesome. So I'm excited to hear what they have to say.
Well, sorry to put you on the spot. I just think your opinions are extremely valuable as far as your analysis of these scenarios. So that's specifically what I want to hear about. I don't know about other folks, but.
So, hi, I'm Marianne. It's good to see you all. I guess what I would say, I'm the principal of Fales. I love Westborough. I worked at Hastings. I've been at Fales now for 16 years as a principal. I grew up in Northborough. I'm one of 10 children, so I am used to having a full house. And it's been hard not having our full house yet at Fales. So we are very much looking forward to welcoming everyone to Fales, whoever that is. So I just want to say that. I am in support of scenario 8. I think that is a good scenario that gives us that reflection.
And I see the tricks involved with that. Like, I see that, I understand that walkability piece. For scenario 5, my hesitation or my worries about scenario 5 is making sure that I can do that when everyone comes, make them feel welcome, make them feel included, because I'm worried about how much room for everyone. So in our K1 wing, we have 5 classrooms, 5 for K, 5 for first. And some of the modeling that I'm doing with scenario 5 could be 6 at each, depending on what you want those class sizes to be, depending on how kindergarten, plays out. Maybe it's 6 at kindergarten and 5 at first grade. You then have one classroom that can't be in that wing with the rest of their peers, and that doesn't feel inclusive. That feels different. That feels not right, when on day one. Like when I was in the old fails, we did have that happen. There were times where I had a different grade level on a different floor and we made it work. But I don't think that's how we want to start off. So that's my hesitation with that, which then causes some of the bumping. The other piece is what we were talking about before, the programming that's happening at fails and how we utilize that space. The other piece, Letitia, who is our ELL director, she's concerned about the services for our EL students and how many teachers would be incorporated into 5. So 3 ELL teachers would be needed if we went to scenario 5, which again pushes on the space aspect. So that's where I'm concerned about 5. There maybe is another scenario out there that you all can dream up that works right. And then as far as 1B, I understand we want to fill fails, is that something that can happen with 1B? Not immediately. So,
Thank you.
any questions?
Thank you.
No,
Yeah,
is that good?
Well, last.
I think just one quick question. The 3 ELL teachers, they need their own classroom too. Is that the point?
What my understanding from Tisha is that you could put 2 in a class, like the classroom spaces that I have, it would end up being like 3 spaces that we would need.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Hi, Aidan McCann, principal at Armstrong. Grew up here, went to Hastings. Very happy to still be here. I fully support scenario 8, based on the fact that I've, echo what Nick said in terms of, all the reasons why we're recommending this one. In terms of balancing out the schools and making sure that we're thinking about the diversity of those schools and equal opportunity across the 3. I am concerned about scenario 5 for 3 different reasons. I do think 101 students, if we were to shift them from Armstrong over to fails, I know that this was said previously, but I'll share it again. I do think that drops us to about 280. And so now we're in a position where we are fails. We significantly concentrate the white population. And so we have lost a diverse population that we love very much. And we know we're going to have to make shifts in whichever scenario we choose. But that significantly concentrates the demographics at Armstrong. And so if the intention of this project is for us to fill fails, I would assume that there's probably an unwritten tagline that says not at the expense of the other buildings. And it feels as though if we were to move 101 students, that would be flipping the situation from fails to Armstrong. And so now we're sitting here scratching our heads going, that feels like we're in the same situation. So I don't feel like it actually solves what we're trying to solve. Also, just to be a little bit, to add on to what Marion was saying about the EL students, I have a total of 90 EL students at Armstrong at the present time. 41 of them would move. That's almost half of the entire EL population at Armstrong. So it would be a move of staff, and yes, they can double up. So it's not that each individual teacher needs their own room, but it would be more additional spaces. So when we talk about the number of rooms that she's going to need, I can't even remember if we took into account those additional EL rooms when we had that up there, or we did not.
Yeah, we would be having a problem.
We would have a problem with space. Yep. So for those reasons, I don't find scenario 5 to be the optimal scenario. I find scenario 8 to be one that does balance the school in terms of numbers, in terms of diversity, gets us to utilization that seems reasonable. And in terms of what's coming up online in the future, I think, if we're putting that conversation off until later, we can make decisions later on that could potentially solve any other problems that come up. Thank you.
What about scenario 1B?
Scenario 1B could work. Obviously, I'm always thinking about how far students have to walk. And so if that removes that issue, I think there's more layers to it, because I don't want, if you go back to scenario 8 just for a second, I'm looking at that little orange area downtown, and I wouldn't want any families to think that we're not considering that. That's obviously something that we think quite a bit about. I walked from Flanders Road over to Hastings every single day for 6 years from K5. So it was really important to me to be able to walk to the school that was right next door. That was about a 0.3 mile walk. I had friends who lived at the top of Hastings and said, "What am I doing walking all the way?" Or excuse me, they lived at the top of Hundreds, and they had to walk all the way down to Hastings. And they said, "This is illogical. It's a long walk." So not to say that those families, I want them to have that opportunity, but at the same time, I look at that line and I say, if that really is about, a mile from the school, what trade-offs, are we playing here, and does it make sense to make that move? So that's a hard one for me to answer, to say that it's a difficult situation. I would like to be able to somehow make that work, but I still believe that scenario 8 is the better option. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. We also recognize that you have a really difficult decision to make, and so we appreciate all your thought in looking at the scenarios and taking the feedback of all of our families, because this isn't easy and it's going to impact someone, and we recognize that. For Hastings, as you can see in the scenarios, they're very similar. The impact on our community, we don't shift, they don't change for each scenario. So in any scenario that's selected for Hastings, it will open up classrooms, whether that's 1, 2, or 3. We can't really predict at this time, but it will open up enough space to free up some of the instructional constraints we have had in the past. We have decreased enrollment over time, as we know, in the town. So over the last 5 years, we've been able to open up space, and opening up 1, 2, maybe 3 classrooms will do that even further. Yet each scenario doesn't really change Hastings much. Scenario 8 adds a small area of Hastings, but it really is 12 students. So that in and of itself isn't a huge impact. I think walkability obviously is important. It's hard, I know I've heard feedback that southern part of Hastings is walkable to Fales, and they come to me, and we love that they come to me, and moving them isn't going to solve the problems of long-term sustainability, helping the demographic balance across the town. That doesn't get at those goals, but walkability is a factor, and so it's a hard decision. Any questions for me about Hastings, or?
Anyone have any questions for any of them? Any more questions?
Thanks as always.
So much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Also, I have a colleague who's giving me real-time updates. One of the additional considerations sort of tied in with the new developments is those new developments are all slated to be rentals and not actually purchase houses or condos. So just another consideration.
All right, so you're still presenting, right? Or are you not?
Yeah, no, I'm still presenting.
Yeah. Go ahead. I know
I mean, we've only been,
cut you in the
it's only
middle.
been an hour and 15. I mean, like, we still got another hour left. It's
I know
so
I
good.
cut you off in the middle, sorry.
No. That was helpful. They'll probably come back up again. At the end of the day, and I do want to emphasize this, a lot of this is informed by discussions with the strategic working group, the principals, the district, and the community. So lots of people like to throw my name in vain, but at the end of the day, a lot of this has been informed not only just by the data, but a lot of the conversations that we've been having as well. All right, so we are at the moment where we are with the 3 proposed scenarios. Again, I will sort of just reiterate, they are very diverse in what they accomplish, and they do not rhyme across each scenario. And so ultimately you do have a lot of trade-offs across the different scenarios. So for that, that's what you paid me for. But on the flip side too, I am sorry, because that does make the decision rather complicated. If you are all good, we will move on to the implementation piece. So now, whatever choice you choose, oops, we are way back. In terms of whatever choice you choose, implementation is obviously a consideration. So a couple things that we wanted to identify. On the left-hand side, in terms of some of the considerations, obviously fiscal rears its head, one of the largest. Like we had talked about before, Park and Homestead each utilize 1 dedicated bus. Arrive utilizes 2 full buses. Those, for all intents and purposes, are easy, but not easy in the context of how a grandfathering process would work, where you would have to purchase an additional bus to start to phase in, or rather phase out the old generation and phase in the new generation. And then after you have a complete sort of cycle of through, you could then basically save on the additional costs that you would have. So the cost of staying, grandfathering a single grade level requires adding a dedicated bus per neighborhood. That's just how it has to be in regards to now sending, kindergarten kids one way and then the rest of the kids the other way. We put the bottom line down on the bottom. A bus rate is about $500 per day. No difference between half or full buses. The annual cost is about $88,000. So if you were to, again, just use Park and Homestead as an example, the total annual cost, annual cost for those different routes would be $176,000. On the right-hand side, I just kind of wanted to, because we've run into this problem before, because it is kind of a mind trip as you start to think through, what are we talking about when we're thinking about grandfathering? So on the left-hand side of the chart, you can see today. So anybody that's in blue, that's kindergarten 1 and 2, are affected, right? Because current 3rd graders are going to 4th grade. This decision does not affect them. So you have 3 grade levels that generally are going to be affected. And so as you move to the right, which is every subsequent year, that is the grade that they would be in. So 2nd graders will be 3rd, 1st will be 2nd, K will be 1st. And so what we tried to sort of indicate here is, let's say you wanted to grandfather every single kid in, it would take you through school year 28-29. Ultimately being the choice that is made. So that is a 3-year sort of decision that you could make. As was sort of indicated before, well, the 3rd graders, you keep 3rd graders. Well, we did try to isolate, how many siblings are we talking about? You are talking, I think, just a rough ballpark, anywhere from 30 to 50 siblings. I'm sorry, not 30 to 50, because you had said 20 in 3rd grade. I'm putting you.
8, 16.
16. Okay. So you're talking, I would say, a good dozen, if not 2 dozen kids that have siblings. So the decision point there is do you keep the siblings? Let's say you're just going to do 3rd grade. Do you keep the siblings and then, focus them on finishing out their time? Or do you keep them for an additional year and then move them, which is then coming back to the argument of why you wouldn't want to move a kid now. So the sibling piece actually really does complicate the whole situation, because if you're going to keep them, you're now putting the parent into a position of, do I benefit my oldest one or do I benefit my youngest one? And how do I sort of balance those 2 out? So here at the bottom, again, this is for scenario, for scenario 8 as an example, because that's what we recommended. Those would be the total number of students that would essentially be affected in terms of the move. So for 26-27, you would have 48 individuals, quote unquote, being grandfathered from Armstrong, 39 in Hastings, and then subsequently get smaller and smaller as the year goes on. The operational barrier, so other additional considerations in terms of talking with the district, there is, I guess, a bus driver shortage, and so that complicates the issue of identifying multiple buses and bus routes. Again, thinking about securing vehicles does not guarantee securing drivers. And so really that is a whole nother aspect, much to, I think, the superintendent's point is whatever decision needs to be made, sooner the better, because we start to logistically and administratively plan for the following year. And that is actually one thing, sorry, it just reminded me, which I should have emphasized. That is the big piece too from the surveys that we received is they want to know, and they want to know sooner rather than later. And from that, they want to be able to know what's their busing route situation and what's the kindergarten situation. So on the flip side, that it's too soon, it's being rushed, they want to also make a decision quickly. So to layer that onto your decision-making process as well. In terms of logistical constraints, we have actually tried to say like, okay, let's hypothetically say that there is space. If we think about Westborough Village, maybe there's space that could just run up and pick up the kindergarten kids and then come back down. That obviously becomes quite the challenge when we think about bell times. There is not a lot of space to be able to pull that off across the different scenarios. And again, creates both a confusing nature of who's getting on what bus, as well as extending drive times for buses if we're kind of like sending multiple buses everywhere. So that all leads to, from a recommendation standpoint, we particularly do not recommend grandfathering due to basically three distinct reasons. Financially, it is a significant increase on an annual basis for the next 3 years. Operational is a trick in terms of executing on additional bus routes. And then again, thinking about how the drops could happen and could not happen really constrain it given the same similar bus times. I'll also say too, there are, I think, there have been studies, obviously, but K to 3 is not K to 5 and is not 6 to 8, right, in terms of the social emotional space. Now, I'm not minimizing the challenge that it is for individuals and kids of 1, 2, and 3 to move. That being said, from the time span that we're thinking about in regards to the grade levels and the supports, which we'll get to in a second, our recommendation would be to just sort of, as some of the parents have sort of rip the Band-Aid, move everybody, treat the district as a whole. And if basically the entire district is moving as one, that really does spread load, I think, the impact, the emphasis, the sort of motivation of parents and communities and schools to sort of, I think, gather together and work as one in which to sort of execute the redistricting within a very timely manner. Which sort of leads us to the final point, which is, again, part of the conversations that we've had with the principals in the district and the strategic working group is around at some point, somebody's going to have to move. And so what are instead of being reactive, right, how can we be proactive in terms of helping both the students and the families really think about what that move could look like? So in terms of different ways that the district could sort of lean in on this along with the individual schools, we talked about it across student integration, family and community building, and planning and support. And so really that's thinking about how can existing students make those field trips to fails, organize daytime visits, much like I'm sure you probably all do when it comes to middle school to high school, and thinking about, how do you get kids exposed to what that environment's going to look like, thinking about buddy activities and thinking about connecting parent groups and students and individuals so that they can shadow for a day or hang out and sort of get to know people. School tours and meet the teacher are all both suggested by different parents and was one of the areas that were really like, we want this to happen if we are going to make the redistricting. There could be weekend gatherings, family nights, meet the principal, parent group roles, all sort of emphasizing the idea that you're creating space for parents and their children to go and start to build those connections ahead of time. And then thinking about planning and support, really thinking about the new family survey and daytime connections. Again, all about really, you have the time in which to start building these connections and start preparing the kids for the move. And at the end of the day, there is enough time and space to really emphasize and support both. Again, I do want to emphasize the parents, because I think the parents a lot of times, this takes them harder. I have 2 kids of my own. I get it. You kind of internalize what you think your kid is going through. And so that is a challenge as well. So providing support to the parents and to the students as well during this process. Any questions?
I'll start with Tim.
guess on that, just one question. I just want to confirm my understanding, because I know that you had the slide, that one that you just passed, laying out like the different years and what that would look like. But even though the students decreases and even the grade level of students affected over time, because it's different neighborhoods, the cost would remain the same. Like we'd still need 2 buses for the entirety of that time. But there'd be.
Yeah, so the way I like to think about it is, let's take Park, for instance. Next year, you have a kindergarten group that needs to go, I'm making this up. 10 kids need to get on the bus to go to Fales. The rest of the 30 kids or 20 kids are going to go to Armstrong. Every year that goes by, you just move more kids that are going to Fales. And so even though you might have 2 kids going to Armstrong, you still need that bus to go bring them to Armstrong. And so, yeah, ultimately, the entirety of your transition time will incorporate that extra bus.
Our bus costs are the same if we do a half bus or a full-size bus per day. So that's a factor we did look at in trying to figure this out. So.
And just confirming as well that this is, like we wouldn't have to renegotiate anything, like this would be able to be built into our current school bus contract. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say, have you heard any parents who were explicitly against grandfathering, who actually want to move? I wonder, because we hear from some parents, they worry about their siblings being split.
Yeah, especially even in the strategic working group. There is always, I'll say this, there's always going to be parents that, and I'm quoting real people here. I was in the military. I moved around every single year, right? Like, kids will be okay. This will not be the end of the world, especially at this young of age. They're very flexible and adaptable. And, again, you all have 3 great schools. There's not going to be a set of kids that get left behind. And so they support that. They believe in that. And ultimately, at the end of the day, they know the kids will be okay. There will also be a set of parents that this will be the end of the world and you are completely destroying my kids' future. And again, having moved and having had my own child go in first grade from one school to another school, it is scary and it is really a hard decision. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, I wish I could tell you, like one is over the other. You will always hear both from that perspective.
I did, within the working group context, I was in the room where this conversation came up. A couple of different parents in that group indicated that they felt like, given the time we are in and the financial circumstances we are in, the money's better spent elsewhere. That was their sense of kind of an argument against grandfathering too. So.
And I believe on one of the virtual meetings that we had, there was a parent who actually had 2 to 3 kids that were all going to be affected by this. And she, 1, appreciated the process, and 2, basically said, let's do it, right? Like, we understand it's got to be done.
So just to be clear, I'm not supporting grandfathering, but if we did that and we support scenario 8, that's $264,000, so over $250,000 that we need to add to support scenario 8 and grandfathering. That itself to me is just unacceptable. So
yes, I will say, be very careful. Do not let one decision influence the other. You're totally right, and that is an expensive cost. I would decide on the merits of the scenarios and then come to the decision of the implementation. Because what you just did is conflate both, and then it makes for a very complicated decision.
we do have to keep in mind the bill at the end of the day. But I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I just in terms of, I think the challenge is all of the different considerations with siblings. The great thing about our district right now is, and I hope it continues to stay this way for some time, is we have enough space that all the kids come back to the same school they're
Exactly.
together in Mill Pond. So really, it will be a disturbance, but it's not, a permanent change. They're going to come back together. And so obviously in the times that we're in, my biggest consideration with respect to simply just the implementation piece would be that I just don't know how we can make grandfathering work and make it work where it's also makes sense for the families, because I think, I think they're going to be split too. It's like the rip the Band-Aid piece off, because you get a child, and if you grandfather the third grader, going into third grade, I guess now I'm getting confused about the grades. You said that was going to happen, but
Yeah.
and then we take the bus is already now. We have to have the bus, and then you take into consideration the siblings, but the sibling has to move after a year. I think that's quite messy for parents as well. I think it's better, especially for the siblings, to just get in there and start making, more friends. So, but I don't know. That's a tough decision. I'll go ahead and pass it to Jane if she has anything to say.
The grandfathering is tricky. And one thing, just to echo what Allison was saying, in the working group, I was really surprised at the consistency of opinions from principals to teachers to parents that we shouldn't grandfather. And that surprised me. And I was really happy to hear it, though, because although I think it'll be hard, it seems like when we really start thinking about the cost of it, the drawn out sort of anxiety of it too, I think that's another thing that that either a parent or one of the teachers brought up. I mean, I think that there is that, drawn out anxiety. I really appreciate hearing from the principals. Thank you all, and for all the number crunching you've done. It's really helpful, and this is such a hard decision. But thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you all for the information presented here. As I said before, I was really impressed with the information from the parents out there that has been distributed to us. And it's not an easy issue to deal with. Unfortunately, I think we will be dealing with it again as zoning seems to change even at a faster rate. Well, certainly one of the drivers is that somehow or another, all these changes that we are voting at town meeting are going to make life easier. I think from our perspective, it makes life a lot harder. So, it probably isn't a done deal, but we'll be seeing it again in a while. So with that, I guess I wait and see what else we hear from tonight's session and wherever we go from here.
Unless you're not going to go over the appendices. You're just
No, they're and so sorry for those folks watching. In the appendix are all of the slides that we have previously presented before, for added context.
Yeah. So right now, the plan is that in our next meeting, we're hoping to vote this. I think it's a really tough decision for all of us. We want to this was really immensely helpful. I thank you so much for coming. I really wanted to hear from you all and kind of understand what considerations you guys have been thinking about. I hope that we can come to a decision for that next meeting. I really urge the community to continue communicating, because that is ultimately what we want, is to hear from the community and to make sure that we're representing the community in the way that they wish. So that's what I would like to end with as far as this presentation is concerned. But do you have any other comments?
I think the one comment, and this is more to the public, and tell me if this is wrong. If you are going to email, you should email the school committee. You email you all directly, because now I'm not saying it's out of my hands, but it is now in your hands. And so ultimately, I think that's how that cycle needs to work.
Yeah.
I will come back for the meeting in which you will make a decision. And so in the meantime, if you have questions or thoughts, please, feel free to leverage me, and I'll be meeting with the superintendent weekly until that happens.
Yeah. Just a side note, in case, something happens in the next couple of weeks where, we get this bright idea to make a small little
tweaks here and there.
Tweak here and there. I mean, how open to that are? He suggested a rectangle, so I'm just.
Yeah, I will say this: I'm happy to jump on a call, not with quorum, of course, and happily answer any questions. And if there is a compelling reason why we need to remodel something, we'll entertain that for sure. At the end of the day, we want to make sure you guys make the best decision. I will say, contract-wise, we are well past where we are, and that's fine, because it is worth it at the end of the day. But we are here, we are available. So to what extent we can provide you with finalized solutions, we'll have conversations. Absolutely.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
I really want to thank Nick and Katie, who is the kind of in the background GIS whiz, who's really helped us through this process and given us all the numbers that our principals have used to model everything out. In addition, as part of the work that Dillinger has done, they're providing us with a kind of a really helpful demographic report that I will be able to provide you in draft form, a copy of in the next, I don't know, next couple days.
Yeah.
So that's sort of backdrop information that's just helpful to have in hand. And actually, I think it's setting us up for thinking about future development as well. So it's an important part of the process that's not as much in the foreground here, but it's certainly a benefit of having worked with the company. And, they've done an extraordinary work, and I really want to thank them for it.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
I think it's the geothermal update.
Great. All right, this is a quick verbal update for you. It's a situation that I want to make sure you are aware of, but also that the public is informed about. Steve was there last night. I went to the Board of Health. In the fall, we had one of our maintenance crew kind of uncovered a situation with our geothermal system. By design, the system has propylene glycol that's in it it's an antifreeze to kind of help keep the system running properly. And when we opened the school, essentially we were told by the designers we're going to need to feed that system in order to get air bubbles out of the system. There's a little more backstory to this, and I know Steve knows all the details of kind of what happened along the way in terms of building that system. But we reached a point where this employee said, we've added more than we should have, so something's up. So he alerted us. Kelly Giacopello, our director of facilities, called Skillings, another company, to come in and do some testing on site. They performed several different tests, and ultimately, because of some pressure testing, we're able to identify a certain portion of the system. The system has 5 different circuits. Circuit 1 is where they realized there's this pressure differential. They were able to isolate that circuit, and then the pressure stabilized, and we have not had to add significant amounts of geothermal,
Any
propylene.
additional fluids?
Not since that time. So I think the sense is we do see evidence that there was a leak. We then reached out to the OPM for the project, the architect, the geothermal designer, and got everybody in the room to talk about next steps moving forward. The great news is that the system is under warranty, so we'll be able to, we think, affect a solution to get it back up to full functionality. And Anita has been meeting weekly with Steve Theron, who's representative from our OPM, just to track progress as he works with the subcontractors to make sure we get people back in. In terms of the leak itself, we've reached out to as I mentioned, the Board of Health last night, but also the Mass Department of Environmental Protection, just to make sure we get all the right information about, is there any concern that we should have or that the public should have. Good news is the substance is, it's considered safe by the FDA. There aren't reporting requirements, and we have and will continue to kind of listen to the Board of Health and the Mass Department of Environmental Protection if anything does come our way around this process. But I wanted to let you know prior to sending out I'll be sending out a full letter to the community tomorrow, and it felt important to sort of say it out loud here and get any other pieces of information that you want to make sure I include when I do write that and put it out into the world.
Just to add that, the remaining effort is of the group that's been isolated from the rest of the well field. Our next step is to find out exactly which one of the wells in that group has this slow leak. And there will be people on site in February to begin that process. So what'll happen is there's 5 wells in the group. They will isolate from the middle position and find out which branch, if you will, has that leak, and then from there, isolate again and find out which one of the remaining 3 it is. We believe it's probably in one of the fittings rather than in the well, and so it's likely to be above ground or near the surface. And so we hope it'll be remediated relatively soon, and we go on about our business. So, like I said, or like Allison said, that the program was the belief that there would be a need to bleed the system and get the air out. Sort of like getting the air out of your spongy brakes. If anybody's had it, you know what that feels like. But anyway, so that's the process, and it should be resolved soon.
Yes. Yeah. And I want to thank Steve just for kind of being part of this conversation. I think he had so much involvement in that building process, kind of knew all the twists and turns along the process of installation. So that was incredibly helpful as we're thinking about what our next steps are. And the good news is the OPM Vertex has been highly responsive. Everybody in the situation has been highly responsive, and we look forward to getting taken care of soon. But if you have any other thoughts about notification before that goes
Allison, I
on.
just have a question about your meeting with
Sure.
the Board of Health yesterday.
Yes.
So were there any further recommendations from the board?
Their
Only one.
only recommendation beyond our additional kind of what we've done already is they're going to send us a list of neighbors abutting who may have wells, so we can inform them as well as the Fales parental community. So we're not just focused on our own kind of students and parents, but also on the actual neighbors, so that people are well aware of what action's being taken, and if they want to do any of their own sort of testing, they can do that too.
Yeah, I guess just to add to that, one of the questions was the forget what it's called, but the material sheet on what this material is. It's food grade antifreeze that's used in processing food. So
Yes.
it is safe, as was said by Allison, and we knew that from the beginning. We required that to be the case.
It's and that's, these systems, I guess now are, when by design, they use this substance because of its proximity to schools and children, that is the safest possible substance. So that's the great news about it. It's just, we want to make sure we're checking all the boxes, given that when you hear about a leak out of a kind of heating cooling system, we want to make sure everybody is very comfortable that we're taking all the steps we need to take, so that if there is anything we should be doing, we will do it. So.
I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that until the fix is in place, I presume the building is operating normally.
It is.
Yes, it is. What happens with a group being isolated, it means the final number of wells is 37. So 5 of the 37 are valved out of the system and isolated. And the system is operating. Actually, what happens is because we're using ground heat, okay, because we have 5 wells short at this point, we're taking more heat out of the ground versus the long-term effect of having more wells. So for sure, we can operate for a number of years with the 5 wells missing from the system. And that was a question that was asked to make sure that, as everybody I think knows by now, that the building systems, the geothermal as well as the solar, basically means the town is not paying for heat or light in the building. Certainly, we don't want to see that change. So.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's being supplied by these solar and geothermal systems.
It's interesting. These systems are becoming kind of the new normal throughout the Commonwealth in terms of school building projects, because of the sort of sustainable impact and the lower cost to the district and town in terms of energy. So
What we found out when we approached the Massachusetts School Building Authority is that they wouldn't fund as part of their offerings either the solar or the geothermal at the time. As Allison said, it's now included in what could be done relative to a future school by Massachusetts. However, as a result of that quirk, and we were very unhappy about it, but as a result of the fact that the town paid the full cost for that, we did get $1.8 million back from the federal government last year before that process was changed by the Trump administration. So we were the only one in the state that got money back from the feds on a geothermal system.
That's wonderful. Thank you for the update, Allison, on that one. I think you have another update for us on the principal search.
Yeah, and I think those of you have seen this announcement. We are in the middle of it right now. We had announced last week we have 3 finalists for the middle school principal role. And the first 2 of those 3 have done their site visits already. Tom Millett came yesterday. Jody Cohen is visiting today. Scott Connery is scheduled to visit next Monday, which weather-wise is, it's on my radar, certainly. And so we do have a backup schedule that we're working to create just in case, and have corresponded with him already to make sure he's available during that time. The process has been fantastic. So our candidates show up in the middle school. They meet with our administrative team. They then are whisked off on a building tour with Matt and Chris Martin, and are in and out of some classrooms observing what's going on in terms of teaching and learning. Then back to the library where we have an extraordinary student panel. I have to say, I want to give lots of credit to Vice Principal Maureen McCann, who pulled together a group of students. It's been my, no offense to anybody else, it's been my favorite part of the process is watching that. They ask really great questions, and we're such great representatives of the school. So there's a student panel, and then a faculty meeting, a parent session, and then finally at the end of the day, the candidates are meeting with Matt and myself for a final interview. After this is all said and done, we will be looking at feedback from each of those constituent groups. We've got a survey, a quick Google survey that goes out so we can get comments and feedback. And we're currently in the process of doing reference checking too. And I do want to say that's an important part of the process. I take reference checking very seriously because I think although the kind of performance of candidates during the day as they show up on site is helpful and a really good sign, and you can kind of get a sense of who the person is. The references are the folks who give us a sense of how they work day to day. So that is a piece that's often in the background, but highly, highly important. So at the end of all of that, I'll be making a decision, and it's not going to be an easy one. These are 3 extraordinary candidates, and we are hoping to make an announcement and have a hire complete before February vacation. So we're on track. I am grateful for the work that Tammy Costello and Brian Callahan did, sort of leading the search committee, in part because they really pushed to get this out early so that we could really be competitive in an environment where I think we want to make sure we have the best possible leadership in place. Principal Foley has been extraordinary as a force in this district and is an excellent leader, and finding his replacement is tough, and we wanted to do the best we could. So that's.
Thank you. So I think we have a couple of discussion items. Why don't you, Steve, you want to talk to us about the recommendation that the subcommittee has for the GMS Fieldhouse?
As I mentioned at our last meeting, that we had a subcommittee that was created to study the condition of the Gibbons Fieldhouse and review it in regards to at that time, the recommendation to demolish the building at a cost of $125,000. Yakub and I, plus the 2 principals, Aidan McCann and Jack Foley at Gibbons, reviewed the project, went through the building, for which I supplied the summary report with photographs of the building, and our group unanimously recommended that with the ability to repair the roof with a submitted proposal from a local contractor to repair the roof, who has done work for the town before, and for others in the town. It's a family business. So the recommendation was to repair the roof and the facade carpentry at a cost of $31,000, with a $5,000 contingency added to that, and an additional $10,000 to remove the petitions from the field house so that the space is more open and more useful. The committee recommended that we take the course of repairing the roof, removing the petitions, and to fix the soffit of the roof area at a cost of $46,000 versus the original recommendation to demolish the building at $125,000. Included in the report was a redraft of the article for the town meeting, which I believe is correct and includes the dollar amount that I just said. And so I would move that we vote to do so and modify the town meeting warrant to that condition if it's so voted.
I second.
Any discussion? Just one point, we have to approve all of the town meeting warrant articles, so, I mean, we can do this one, as part of this, but we have to do those separately anyways.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
500, okay. And then I think that you have a report for us or some information on a study regarding operational efficiency with the town.
Yes, and this is, you'll see this, I sent out, and I'll send around here. These are the old draft. This draft does not include the updated field house language. This is the old draft, but I will reach out to town manager and make sure she gets that new draft information. These are draft, there's draft town meeting language, and I wanted to make you aware of a warrant article that the town manager has drafted, and it's related to the idea of entering into an operational efficiency study that would look at, it's sort of a partnership opportunity between the schools in town. And I know there was discussion about this last year at the budget summit, that, if there are possibilities of realizing savings, of providing better services, or increasing capacity by looking at ways where some of our positions might overlap between the municipal side and the school side, or other types of functions, purchasing, things like that, that a study would help us to sort of understand those things. I think it's important, if we were going to enter into this, that it would be a joint venture, that an article that was co-sponsored by the select board and the school committee would be much more powerful than something that was imposed by one party or another. My understanding is in the past there was a study that was done, but the schools were not really invited in as much as told the outcome, and that just doesn't feel as productive from where I stand. How it would work would be to appropriate a sum of money that would be used to find a service or a consultant that does this work. And I think there's a value in having that outside expertise, but also a sort of neutral eye to look at overlapping functions. It's a little harder to do that for the people who are boots on the ground, because you can kind of get into a tussle over whose stuff is what, right? And along with the study, I would imagine the formation of a kind of joint committee where there's representation from the select board and from this board to both kind of go through the process of developing the scope of work, but also to sort of oversee what happens. So those are some of the provisions that I think, I think it's a really thoughtful proposal. It's an opportunity to partner with folks on the municipal side in a meaningful way and really explore a question that keeps kind of coming up. Are there possibilities for us to realize some kind of budgetary savings, or just sort of do better work,
I just want to say that I think this is great. I think it's long overdue, and I'm excited to see if there is anything. I mean, this is the best way to go about it. So I'm hoping that we're able to discover some new opportunities in this. Does anyone have any question or comments?
Will there be a dollar amount on there?
Free cash.
It's,
There will be. I mean,
It-
obviously, with a free cash offering from the town meeting, it would be, it wouldn't come out of the school budget.
No,
That's-
no.
That's for sure.
No, it's not and this is a raise and appropriate or coming from free cash. I think right now, the town manager is consulting with other towns that have done this work to try and get a clear estimated price point for what the work typically costs. One piece of bad news, in the past, there was some grant funding out of the government for funding these kinds of explorations. That grant has dried up. So this is the thing where if we want to do it, it has to have money behind it.
Well, my comment would be this. The school department and the school committee are isolated from the rest of the town on purpose by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. There's nothing wrong with the idea here of an efficiency study, and I support that, so that, a consultant could offer things that might be generally possible. However, our responsibility is the educational opportunities for the students in our town. And in fact, as we have discussed many times, the school budget is what the school committee wishes to have the town vote. It's not the responsibility of any other portion of the government. So to the idea that any of these recommendations would modify, if you will, our ability to deliver what we're required to do under the general laws of Massachusetts would be a difficult thing to share. As a matter of fact, I would say we never would share that responsibility. However, as I said, the study makes sense in the idea that, in fact, there may be things we could do that aren't necessarily educational in the way that the school committee delivers product. One of the things that we have discussed many times was certain aspects of what we do here that could be shared with the rest of the town, and I suppose there must be other things that the town could offer as well. But I would say that in my own mind, going forward, there more than likely will be an issue of the jurisdiction of the two departments of the town. And to the extent that it doesn't affect the ability of the school department and the school committee to deliver what we're required by the government of Massachusetts to deliver, then I think the outcome of the study certainly would be acceptable. But I say this with caution, because if after we do the study and a recommendation comes forward and the only focus is how to save money, that's not my interest here. And so to the extent that it would restrict what we do and what we're authorized to do, I would not be in favor of it. So with that caveat, I could support this.
I may add, I also support the idea of having a formal approach to the study, because this idea has been floating around for some time.
Yes.
And I think this is the right approach. I like that it's being authored by both boards, and we don't know what the outcome of this study will be, and I presume the process will be that this group will come up with recommendations that would have to be approved by both boards individually before any changes are made. So I do support this.
I would add that we should participate in who they choose as well.
Yeah.
In other words, we should know who's being considered,
Yes.
how it's being considered, what their qualifications are, et cetera. Just like anything else that we participate in, we need to have knowledge of what's going on, as well as what the criteria is that they've been asked to do. So again, I would support it with that idea.
Do we have any other comments, or can I?
Well, I assume we're going to talk about the other items too, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the rest of the town meeting warrant articles.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of show you those kind of in draft form, and I want to be clear, these are just draft form. And some of them, the first actually I wanted to share with you is not, it's actually the housed under the Community Preservation Committee article, but this is that update we were able to give you last week that the school department's proposal to ask for grant funding or to ask for funding from the CPC to support Hastings Playground was accepted. So that is a warrant article that will go on to town meeting warrant with your approval. The second set are capital improvement plans. The first here is this one that needs to be updated now that you voted. I have that proposed language from Mr. Durrett, and I will forward that to the town manager so she can update the warrant article appropriately to reflect the change, both in terms of the price point and the scope of work for the Gibbons Field House. We also have some borrowing articles here. First off, the high school A and B wing and roof replacement and rim repairs. This is sort of the largest nut. We've talked about this, and this is draft language. So if you see anything here that causes you any level of concern, please let me know.
I have a couple of questions on
Sure.
item 2 and 3, which is the A and B wing roof replacement, including the rim repairs, which is the concrete roof parapet around the building and the old building. And the number in here is $5,732,830. I guess my questions deal with where'd the number come from and what is our process to know that the number presented here is a viable number that we can expect to get the project done for. So could anyone speak to that question?
Sure. I will do some of this, and I think Anita may chime in as well. So we've been working with GRLA as the designer and engineer to explore the kind of the process, and they, I think, as I've shared with you, gave us the 95. They have it. They gave us their full report, which we took to the Capital Expenditures Committee around their recommendations. That initial report had an estimate, and then in the subsequent months, they have refined that estimate by looking at some of the possible kind of additions or subtractions. So their initial estimate actually came out higher, but it included a lot of mechanical replacement of HVAC units on the roof at the time. So they've been kind of working with us on that process. I think our next step is actually around refining and then, well, first of all, we have to get an OPM, and we've got our list of vendors, so we're talking with them about that. And then the next step after that is going out to bid. We're trying to get their estimate as close to what they truly believe bids will come in at as possible, so that we are not in a position at town meeting to have to make any adjustment, because we know that that could be very problematic. So that's kind of where we are right now. Anything else, Anita, that I missed? That was sort of bumbling. This is a new process for me, so I appreciate any feedback or advice you have, or any ways you all want to pitch in and help out. I'd love for that.
Well, the reason why this was out for an engineer to be able to create the drawings and specifications was that recent policy within the last 5 years, based on our experience of having engineers' estimates that weren't worth the bucket to hold the water. And in fact, the variability has been horrendous over time. And so, yes, it's good to have an engineer's estimate, but it's useless when you go to town meeting where, in fact, you don't want to have a estimate come in after the town has voted the amount of money. So the policy, as stated by the Board of Selectmen and accepted by the school committee, was to go out to bid with a valid bid in hand by the time we get to town meeting, so that in fact the number at town meeting can be the actual number as protected by the bid and the policies and the specifications, so that we know the quality of the work that's going to be done. And if the roof C is of the same character, then I certainly submit that the school committee, in its offer to the town meeting to vote the roof values for the two of these, is that we get out to bid ASAP, with the documents that hopefully by now have been created by the architect engineer. Normally, we would have the OPM in hand as well, so that we know what those additional costs are. And I don't know, not having seen the report that you referenced, I don't know whether the OPM's cost for the supervision of their work is included in this number or not. But I certainly warn us, the school committee, that without getting a bid in hand, then in fact, it's very difficult to know that we're going to have a number that can be voted by town meeting, particularly since it's a borrow. And I believe these are the only 2 borrows on the warrant.
We do have the timeline that we're working with GRLA on does have us having the capacity to have bid numbers, like concrete bid numbers in hand prior to town meeting. I think right now we're in draft form. It's not much of a margin, but
And by the way, is there a contingency in this number?
yes.
How much? What percent?
They built in 5%.
That is nowhere near.
The March 18th is bid recommendation. So we'd be having bids in hand by the 11th, and then an opportunity for acceptance after that. So it gets us just under the wire for town meeting.
Well, if the warrant is closed before that, and we don't have the opportunity to change the number,
We have reached out to the town moderator around that issue just to find out what the options are in that case. There is a mechanism, he states, for doing that if need be. We've pushed hard to kind of get this to this point, and really are looking to try and make sure we have something concrete to bring forward. We're not really interested in going forward with a number that's not a real number, so.
well, I understand that.
Yeah.
But I think you're going to find it difficult to get things done in what's left. So hopefully the the moderator will be able to adjust the number. Historically, he has had a percentage that he wouldn't accept above the number that's printed in the warrant. So, like I said, the contingency at 5% is nowhere near enough. Historically, it's been 15%, and still sometimes we approach that. So, those are my comments.
Yeah, given the time constraints on this, though, I'm wondering if, we work with what we have, and and also this flexibility or whatever it is that the moderator is offering potentially. And then, if we have to pass over, we pass over if we get to the point where we're not able to come up with a real number.
I would just note that whatever the number is voted by town meeting, we do not have anything more than that. And so you can't award a contract without having enough money in the budget.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why the policy was what it was. And that is also the reason why we hired engineers to create all this stuff, to be able to go out to bid in a timely way, to get the numbers that we need.
Just to confirm the A and B, if everything happens on time and it is voted and approved by the town, that will be the project that will be done this summer.
This
right?
summer, yes.
Okay.
So I guess in the hope that all the things that we need to do can get done, I certainly support the idea we need to do these roofs. And if the number is what it is, I would hope we wouldn't pass over, because the roofs need to be fixed. So I would support the A and B roofs and the high school roofs, and do the best we can to catch up.
Is it a motion?
Yes, it is.
Do I have a second?
Yes, I second.
Do we have any questions or discussion around this? If not, all in favor? 500. Since we're doing that, do you want to talk any further about any of the articles, or do we can move to vote?
I think, I'll be honest, the sort of Sea Wing and Mill Pond, the sort of restoration projects. Those, we're a little torn. I'm not sure which way to recommend on this. I'll be honest. I know we want them as part of the capital plan long term. We've gotten support of the capital expenditures committee. It isn't our intent to do that work or to approach that work without taking the opportunity to explore the next round of MSBA accelerated repair, which opens in the spring of 2027 or the January of 2027. So, and that was clearly stated when we went before Capital Expenditures Planning Committee. Unlike a complete renovation, the restoration's a simpler process, and we're optimistic from talking with other communities that. Where the MSBA process can sometimes introduce new costs, this type of process is a simpler one. These are relatively lower cost projects. So we believe that's really worth exploring because of the reimbursement rate. It just seems like the responsible thing to look into. We've put these tentatively out for consideration for the town meeting warrant, but I think they don't really need to be on this warrant. This could wait until we're further along in sort of exploring that process, until we have more definitive information before we put them forward. So I just wanted to say all that out loud, that these, although I think there's agreement from folks on the town side and the capital expenditures group that they are worthy projects, the time to vote the money may be later.
Yeah, and I think you do, particularly if the approach is to go to the MSBA under their quote minor project scenario, is to find out what the timeline would be and actually what the process is. Because I think, action under starting now to fix this roof, if we're given the grant, is between 2 and 3 years.
Yes.
And so from that point of view, we better get going, because this roof is likely to lose the opportunity to do this particular process at that cost. It may be a roof replacement instead of a overlay, which is what this number is based on.
Yeah, in talking with the consultants with the GRLA, a couple things, they think it's possible that they will be viable in that time window that we're talking about, which is important based on the last assessment that was done. And secondly, the MSBA actually constrains the use of that particular process to a certain time threshold. You have to be at least 25 years, but no more than 30. It's some weird time band, and if we play this right, we're going to fall right smack in the middle of it. So,
well, my comment isn't that particular criteria for the MSBA, but it's their process.
Yes.
Their process to get you to the point where they're going to say, yeah, you're going to fit the 25-year window.
Yes.
Is problematic, and to the extent it's this amount of money, you're going to have an OPM, you're going to have the additional bells and whistles plus their contingencies, which are really substantial, and so that process needs to be outlined absolutely, so that not only do we know, but everybody else we're talking to in the town government also. So
yeah, I mean,
we've been through this once.
Yes.
For Hastings a long time ago.
Okay.
And that's what it took then.
We have looked at timelining out, and I think the January 2027 application, we would expect to find out whether we were accepted into the program sometime between June and November of that same year. So it's a long time even after applying before which would put March of the following year, 2028, as the earliest we would be. Oh, actually, March of that same year, we could go out for. Actually, it's in March of 2028. We'd need to go out for
your engineering
in 27, and then the full project after.
So we're talking about 28, 29, 29, 30
for the actual work. Yes.
For the real work.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
that is true. That's an important factor to keep in mind.
Just for clarity, Allison, you're talking about both the high school C wing and also.
Sea Wing and Mill Pond, right? Those are the two roofs that are viable for that type of
Yeah,
process.
I mean, I would certainly, given the ask that we have for the high school A and B wing,
Yes.
you know, I personally would feel comfortable if we think it's a viable option to avail the MSBA funding, that we be able to push this if possible.
Sort of explore that option.
Yeah, I don't know what other people's thoughts are, but.
Yeah, I agree that that's what we should do, but, you know, the issue here is simply just getting into the process that they have.
Yeah.
And the second piece of it is, if they don't have the money, then you go into the next year. So none of these dates are you know, firm in their process.
I would just add the capital expenditures planning committee, when these roofs were discussed, they actually were even hoping for the A and B roof to be to go through this process. But once they realized that, you know, there is a high urgency to replace that roof, they let go of that idea. So they, you know, we definitely need to go through this process and apply for MSBA for the other two roofs, because it would
Well,
be hard to justify it otherwise.
As far as our existing buildings with the engineering already done, it's not acceptable to the MSBA because they want to have hired the engineer and the OPM. You know, with our recommendation, of course, but, you know, they want to be part of the entire process to protect the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
So then I would say, we probably want to make a motion for just the approval of the, A and B wing roof replacement. And do we need to remove these other two? Do we have to vote to remove these or just not? put them on?
It's in draft form, so if you would prefer to wait before they are included in the warrant, you can just let me know that and we will hold off.
Yeah, if the committee, I mean, I don't know if there's any disagreement about this. I would propose that we hold off on these two.
And
If
remove
everyone's
them
in agreement?
from the warrant.
So I can just, the vote that we just did was for all the rules or for all the warrant articles? Because I'm kind
No,
of,
yeah, we piecemealed it. The only one we did was, yeah, that's why I was trying to do them all together, but we piecemealed it, so now we're kind of, yeah. We did the,
For the record, what have we voted? so
yeah,
far?
the operational efficiency study, we voted. The,
the
we-
field health restoration,
sorry?
the GMS field health restoration.
Field
Yes,
house,
we
field
voted
house.
that.
And
We
then-
have not voted the borrowing
grant.
articles yet.
Well, also the Hastings grant, right? Article 10.
Yeah.
Article 10, yes, and the CPC.
Yeah.
So.
So now,
we
I
need a
guess,
motion.
based on our discussion, I move that we remove the other items from the town warrant on the basis that it's premature, in that we need to get the timeline from the MSBA so that we can know when that money would have to be voted.
And then approve articles, the remaining articles that we have not approved yet. So that's Article 10, Article. Article
14.
2.
So it's the only borrowing one now, the
Yeah, well, on
So
on
he's
this
having to
sheet,
remove.
on this sheet, I thought we had voted,
So Article 10 is actually the one that's remaining, and Article 14 Article 14 number 2. That's all we're voting. The remaining article.
no, 2 and 3. 2 and 3 under that article.
Right.
And,
Right.
And that the Mill Pond roof, no.
I thought
Oh, no, I
three,
thought
no.
2 and 3 we're also holding off on. Just Article 2, just 14.2.
Item 2
Yes,
of 14 is what you said.
Yes,
that's correct. Yeah.
yeah.
Kind of confusing because they are numbered.
I know. It says 14 and then it says 2, yeah. So just to see if we can amend that motion, if we want to,
Do you want me to make the motion? I'll make the motion. Okay.
Thanks,
So
Jane.
I make a motion to approve Article 14-2 and remove Article 14-3 and 14-4. And approve, we didn't do that one. And to approve Article 10
Second.
You have a second?
Yeah.
Do we have any discussion? If not,
I just want to
Oh.
make
Go ahead, no.
just want to make one comment. I just again to
Yes.
express gratitude for the work that went into getting the grant for Hastings Playground. I think this is going to really increase the likelihood of getting that project done sooner than later, and I'm really appreciative of that.
Thank you. I want to give particular thanks to Anita, who sort of spearheaded making sure we got all the information we needed, including outreach to Westborough TV to get drone footage and photographs and all those things, and some additional work that she's done to connect with the Rotary, the Civic Club, and other organizations to try and get some support for the project. So, and also to Julia, our wonderful Hastings principal, who sort of spearheaded the effort there. So.
all in favor?
Aye.
500. Since we're doing this, I just want to take care of this last vote, substantive vote of transfer of the 115 East Main Street property. I thought we put that. If somebody wants to make a motion on that.
I'd move that the school committee supports the transfer of the 115 East Main Street property from the town to the school committee's jurisdiction.
I'll second.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
500. Okay, excellent. Now going back up, we don't have anyone here for citizens' requests, and we'll do school committee reports. I'll start with Tim.
Sure.
The last.
So just one thing to report tonight. I did just want to share with the committee that the EV roadmap has been completed. Lila, the new sustainability coordinator, has been working hard on that, taking over from Ben, who was in the role previously. And so it was funded by a grant from the town side, but it did include some school buildings as well. So she is going to be coming to present. Obviously anything that would happen on school property would have to be approved by the school committee. And there are, essentially from what I understand, every grant is going to be would require a different level of funding. So there are some that would require very little funding because of the culmination of funding factors that go into the different schools and what we might be able to get from the state and different incentives. So she'll be coming by to present that in a future meeting, and we can go through each of those options point by point. So
Can you get a copy of that presentation before she comes before us?
I believe so. Yeah, I know that I want to say there's still a little bit of work to do in terms of just making it specific to the schools, but I believe that I can request that from her, that we get to take a look beforehand. So,
To the extent that we have it before, we could, if we have any comments before, she could be made aware of what they are so that she could respond to them.
nothing else from me.
Yakub?
Nothing to report.
I've got nothing to report.
Just very briefly, last Monday, Meg Garvey set up CPAC, the special ed parent group, presentation by Leslie, who's a member of our community, who works with a state organization that supports those CPACs. And our CPAC has been very dormant, and we're making a big push to try to get it re-engaged. And so it was great. We had, I think, 11 or 12 people attend. It was virtual, but 30 signed up. So they'll be getting the recording. And we had 2 parents volunteer to be temporary leaders of CPAC, which has been sort of the missing piece to rebooting it. So it was wonderful to have Leslie. She's a great resource, and Meg, Ms. Garvey, is doing a really nice job trying to reboot that organization. So I encourage everyone to just keep your eyes open for any CPAC activities that will be starting.
Thank you. Steve?
Yeah, I'd just like to comment again on the information that was provided to us in regards to the redistricting issues, particularly the emails that were received. The sensitivity of those who were writing to me was impressive, and the understanding of the difficulties of the process. I certainly would encourage anyone who has feelings about the redistricting to send your emails to the committee as was discussed earlier tonight. It's important that those who are going to be affected participate. to the extent that you want to spend a few minutes to write an email, I think it'll make a difference in how we deal with the redistricting going forward. So I thank you again for your effort to inform us of your opinions. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Jerry?
Couple quick things. So Hastings Parent Group is holding a dance party this Friday from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Hastings cafeteria. The suggested donation is $5 per family. Parent guardian attendance is required, and students should bring a water bottle. Then tomorrow, the Fails third grade string concert is going to be tomorrow. And then the Fails Parent Group is organizing the Fails Family Fun Day this Saturday from 11 to 12 p.m. There's going to be a bouncy house, goggle ball, crafts, food, raffles, prizes, a DJ, and lots of other fun stuff. So that's going to be pretty cool. The Armstrong Parent Group is holding a fundraising event called the Winter Benefit on January 30th at Cold Harbor from 6 to 9 p.m. That's for adults only. And then registration for Westborough Youth Lacrosse for spring 2026 is now open for kids in K through 8.
The next item I'm going to move to that I skipped over when we were doing votes, and if I'm going to have asked that Jakub speak to this a little bit, is a vote to approve formation of a budget policy subcommittee.
Yes, so this is a result of the discussion that we had at the last meeting regarding the reporting, the situation, the financial troubles that some of the districts are having in our state, and what I would like to make a motion that we form a budget policy subcommittee to review the current policies that we have. It's one of our responsibilities as the board is to manage and review the policies that govern the district, and so we have a current DI fiscal accounting and reporting policy in place, which uses somewhat vague terminology in terms of what's the cadence of the financial updates that the superintendent should be providing to the school committee. And we saw at the last meeting we had the quarterly update, which was great to see. But I would like to review the recommendations from the MASC for what should be the format of these reports, the cadence, also with respect to the master general laws. And so I would like to form this budget policy subcommittee.
That's a great idea. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any questions or comments around this? If not, all in favor? 5-0-0. So that's that. And then the last thing I think that we need to do is approve our minutes, vote our minutes from 1/7/26. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
I
5-0-0.
ask a quick follow-up question on the budget policy subcommittee, so I know to whom to reach out. If it's a subcommittee, I'm curious about who's going to be on it, so I know who to email.
So I was going to propose that both Steve and Jakub be on that committee if you're
True.
up for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless there's opposition.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Great. So let's get back. Did we vote that? Yes. We finished it?
Yeah.
Oh, great. So let's adjourn, please. Somebody,
I'll move that we adjourn.
Second.
all in favor?
Bye.
5-0-0. Good night.
He never wants to discuss.